Well, hello there and welcome back to the studio today. Today just seems like a very relaxing day to oil paint, doesn't it? We're using the New Wave Highland palette. All of the materials that I'm using here are listed in the description box down below for you. Amazon affiliate links are available for you to purchase the exact same materials that I'm using. Just about the only one that I can't seem to find on Amazon is the medium. This is Venetian medium. Let's see if we can get a little zoom in here. This is my absolute favorite medium to use when glazing and things like that. But in the first layer of color, I'm going to call this a color underpainting because the process that I've been using for these paintings is going to remain consistent for I don't know, for a long time. So this is a Nelson Shanks master study. I started this the other night. So the umber layer, the umber drawing is dry. The previous stage didn't, the purpose of the previous stage wasn't to perfectly finish the outlines, but rather create a kind of soft approximation of where everything is going to fit. And now with the next layer, so with this video, I'm going to introduce a color underpainting, meaning some people call it dead palette, others call it, I don't know, I feel like dead palette's probably a derogatory term for a color underpainting. It just means that it's going to be muted. I'm not going to put too many high chroma colors like the ones you see on the original, the wonderful Nelson Shanks painting. So let me talk about my colors before I start mixing the colors. I have Flake White from Williamsburg, Gamboge Lake Extra from Old Holland. I have Yellow Ochre Deep from Old Holland, Cadmium Red Vermilion, Williamsburg, Alizarin Crimson Lake Extra from Old Holland. I know Alizarin is historically fugitive color, but the Lake Extra is a beautiful color, and I trust Old Holland. We have Raw Umber, Winsor Newton. We have Ivory Black from this one is Williamsburg, and I seem to have forgot to put Ultramarine Blue, though I don't really need it. I'm going to just put the Ultramarine Blue here. Just a little dab of it. This is Williamsburg Ultramarine Blue, and you can tell when a oil paint tube is very high quality when there's weight to it. The Old Hollands have a little more weight to them, and it takes a little more force to push the paint out of the tube. But that being said, I probably won't use the Ultramarine Blue that much. So let's go ahead and start to mix up some of the flesh tones. I'm going to keep it really basic because the focus is going to be on drawing. So just the yellow ochre and, excuse me, the Gamboge Lake Extra. But of course this on its own would be too saturated, so Raw Umber to the rescue. And I'm just trying to get an approximation. So let's just do a little test here to see if this is good enough to draw. And that should be alright to draw. I will adjust it from time to time, and you'll see, hopefully that you can see the palette here will help you out. I've kind of stopped using the glass palette on the side over here just because I broke the last one by accident, and I'm kind of tired of having to be cautious of breaking a glass palette. And the New Wave finish, the finish on this palette is exceptional. I've tried so many other palettes, but I keep coming back to the New Wave palette, and in particular when you keep it can't even speak. When you keep it clean, it is exceptional, an exceptional surface to work on. I much prefer it over glass. So enough talking. Now I'm going to get to painting. So already I'm starting to put in planes. So using the flake white, a lead-based white is preferred for this. Just because lead, it's heavy. It's a very archival material to use for painting. You don't want to eat it. You don't want to, eat the tube or use it as toothpaste or something like that. You'll be fine using flake white. Just be smart about it. Don't try to rub your thumb into the lead white and then not wash your hands and then eat strawberries or something. That's how you run into trouble. But if your fear of flake white is because of the lead, I don't think that should stop you from trying out lead white. And knowing how to use it is very important, so I'm gonna talk about that since it's a very important part of what I'm doing right now. I'm using the lead-based white to create very subtle paint mixtures. I'm not aiming for the true color right away. Instead, I'm creating a underpainting surface, so the colors are less bright, and the emphasis is on maintaining the color families. So I'm not going to be jumping in hue that much. So that color that I mixed in the beginning, I'm just going to be creating different values, different shades of it. And I'll use the ground whenever I can. Like this corner here, I'll just use the ground. Now, remember, as I talked about in the first video featuring this Nelson Shanks master study, he, along with his wife Leona Shanks, started the school in Philadelphia. I think it's, I don't know how old the school is now, but their approach to painting is very similar to this, so I'm actually trying to keep the technique as similar as I can, yet still using my own technique. They would call this duotone. But for our purposes, we're just going to refer to this as color underpainting. And with the underpainting, you can actually go in with straight white, like that, and really pop the highlights, because we're going to be glazing this, putting glazes over top of this to make it even more realistic. I'm going to try to get as close to the finish as possible, the beautiful finish that Nelson has placed, or excuse my English, the way Nelson finished it. I'm planning my steps so that it can facilitate a finish. And the way I'm filming these videos is live talking and through 20-minute intervals. So remember, if you are one of my online students, you can take this as a extracurricular activity. And if you're interested in becoming an online student, the cost is only $10 a month. Just check out patreon.com/upariartist. I also have links to that in the description box down below. Now, usually it's a good idea to warm up on the forehead. So even though I've already put some planes over here, I'm probably going to spend a little more time on the forehead. And if you've never used Flake white before, or any kind of lead-based white, you should definitely give it a try, because there's something magical about the layering of the oil color as opposed to simply just using titanium white. You can feel the weight to the paint, kind of how it resists a little bit with the paint drag. Basically just using raw umber right now to create a darker tone. Gonna switch brushes. Now this may be too warm. Yeah, it's too warm. Let's go with the ultramarine blue. Neutralize the color. Might be a little too warm still, so more ultramarine blue. And depending on how things go with my computer, I did some maintenance on my computer, so I should be able to film and create more content. And yes, at the moment that I'm filming this, I'm still working on the Rembrandt. I'm going to have a bunch of different videos filmed ahead of time, so I'll do my best not to refer to the other projects that I'm working on. I'm just mentioning that one because this is the second time I've filmed this painting, as I'm still waiting for the Rembrandt to dry for the next layer. And I always mention the fat over lean with oil painting, so right now I'm painting with less oil, even though I do have a little bit of Venetian medium there. It's only a tiny little amount of Venetian medium, which I may not even use. And if I don't use it with this one, I'll probably use it with whichever other painting I work on today. Remember, I work on multiple paintings a day. And as far as the photo reference is concerned, I have a link to the Studio Incaminati website where you can view this image there. So I am changing up the hue a little bit, making it a little warmer. I really enjoy this red. This is Cadmium Red Vermilion again from Williamsburg. At the moment, it's my favorite red to use for skin tones and other things. So though I'm putting in values and planes and things, I'm not trying to render anything out. You have to constantly consider the next layer when you're painting. Unless you're doing a quick study, you want to be very considerate of the next layer. And by being considerate of the next layer, what I'm doing is I'm not trying to chase any kind of finish just yet. I'm just exploring the planes and trying to make the best educated decisions I possibly can, utilizing the tone of the ground whenever possible. And then in the next layer, we'll utilize this layer whenever possible, so you can tell it's a building process. Now, I'm searching for planes. I'm searching for the most obvious decisions and things that aren't obvious to me at this point. I know there's probably a lot of things that aren't obvious to me at this point, are things that I usually figure out either in the next layer or after taking a break. forgot to mention. And for the solvent to clean off the brush, I alternate between Gamsol, turpentine, and spike lavender. So I have just a little tiny bit of single distilled turpentine on the left side of that cup. I'm just going to use it to clean off the brushes whenever necessary. And I believe Nelson used turpentine, strictly, I believe gum spirits, turpentine. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. And I think for the most part, he used stand oil mixed with turpentine as his medium. I'm just quoting the live streams, the Studio Incarminati live stream. I think I'll use the shadow brush here. Alright, so we have just now passed the first 20. So I'm going to go ahead and take a little break. Alright, we're now entering the second 20-minute interval. So after taking a break, I don't see too much that has gone terribly wrong just yet. I may have the face a little scrunched, but we'll see to that as I continue to develop the shapes. I think at this point it's important to put something down for the ear. The ear is a little higher relative to the eyebrow than I thought. And I guess I could punch it a little bit warmer. Yeah, something about there. And the idea, as I keep mentioning, is to keep the mindset of this is drawing, this is a drawing. Even though we're using color, underpainting is really about further developing your drawing before you push too far into colors, brush strokes, you know, the bravura type looking things. This is more of a building up process. Even though we're not in that stage yet, this is, you know, very much along the lines of a more procedural type of approach, where there's a method and a plan. So I'm constantly holding back from trying to overanalyze the color, is what I'm saying, in order to prioritize the drawing. And I'm still keeping the edges really soft. The painting is still not ready for any sharp edges. So if you're wondering why I'm using Williamsburg and Old Holland primarily now, is that I've noticed a kind of waxiness film or over butteriness with the Winsor and Gamblin brands. You basically have to get the two tubes together. You know, if you compare a Old Holland Ultramarine Blue to a Winsor Newton Ultramarine Blue, you can feel the difference in not only the weight of the tubes, but if you open the tube and actually look and compare the two, the Winsor tends to be a little more oily, and so does the Gamblin. So what I want is a thicker consistency of paint so I can build more easily. But I mean, it's not a bad thing. Winsor, Newton, and Gamblin are good brands. Now this is a very dangerous area, so I'm going to aim to make this soft and not as sharp yet. You always want to have the finish in mind. And for the finish, it's going to be important to have the most control over edges as possible, and it's easier to work over top of a layer that has softer edges, in my opinion, than to work over top of a layer that has too many sharp edges. Notice how I'm going to be working around the mouth before I get to the lips. I don't always do this, but sometimes it helps. Working around the mouth before painting the lips, because the lips are usually, not always, but oftentimes the part of the face that gets moved around the most. And it's also one of the, like, I don't know if I should word it like this, but it's one of the easier features of the face to paint. And like I said, I'm looking for the most obvious stuff And if you layer with thinner paint, meaning I'm not putting too much heavy or too much thick paint, the paint actually dries faster. And if you're working on a smooth surface like this panel, that also helps, I believe, with the drying time. You want the paint to be workable when you are, excuse me, when you're working on it. You know, if you work for 6 or 7 hours on the same painting a day, then you might want to you might want to use a thicker consistency of color and maybe slower drying oil paints. But for the majority of what I'm doing, including my my other studio work, I prefer the paints to be touch dry in about 24 hours. That might be a little too yellow. Now at Incominati, I'm only speaking from experience with like a workshop or two that I may have taken where we did color. For the most part, when I was at Incominati, the school that Nelson and his wife founded, I only did drawing because the first year is strictly drawing. We did have a color study class, but in any case, I believe that they usually will start with brighter color notes than this. But I prefer to work up the saturation rather than start with saturation then work down. That's just my preference. So I'm going to get rid of this because it's way too yellow. Try again. There we go. Not as yellow. Sneak in a little more raw umber just to ensure that it's not too bright yellow. And that's what I like about this yellow, the Gamboge like Extra from Old Holland. It's a very transparent yellow. And I usually don't like when yellows take skin tones and just oversaturate them. So that's why I prefer a transparent yellow. And believe me, I've tried a lot of different yellows, including cadmiums. What I would like to get in the future, though, is a lead tin yellow. I really enjoy the historic pigments. Like, ideally, I want to have, I already have flake white, but lead tin yellow in this place, and genuine vermilion in this place, and genuine ultramarine in that place. But that's going to be quite an investment. But for the time being, this palette works really well for flesh tones and for other things too. I use the same palette for landscapes, which currently only my patrons can see my landscapes, just because I'm not really sharing too much of my artwork on the internet anymore. I'm being very selective of what I show. Okay, alright, so I think now we can start to go into the lip. Let's go ahead and change brushes, just because it's going to be such a huge jump to go into the lips. Now I'm going to use the medium. Tiny little bit of Venetian medium, just to get the paint to flow. When you mix flake white with cadmium red vermilion, whew, that's a really nice, a beautiful color. It's too beautiful of a color to not use, so let's go ahead and use it. So I think the model had a little bit thicker lips than I initially guesstimated in the Umber drawing, which is okay. Oh, and now you can really see the Alizarin Crimson Lake Extra. Am I even calling this right? Alizarin Crimson Lake Extra. Yep, that's what this tube is here. Now that is a wonderful red. But too bright, so raw umber. And it's not the same to just neutralize a rich color. I believe there is a misconception that if you get a beautiful bright color like the old Holland Alizarin Lake Extra, and then you neutralize it with something like raw umber, that it loses the integrity of the richness of the color, and that's just not true. Usually if you use a cheaper color, it will appear cheaper. When you neutralize it, it will be this very kind of overly synthetic and not as harmonious color if you opt for a cheaper lake red. And I clean off the brush a little bit. The distilled turpentine. I see that he threw a bluish tone underneath there. That could just be the tone of the canvas. As I mentioned, Nelson worked on gray tone, neutral gray tones. But we're just going to paint it with raw umber. I threw in a little bit of yellow ochre just to get a slightly greenish tone. A little more raw umber. Now we're going to use this, make it a little warmer, use this for the side plane here. Again, I'm just looking for the most obvious stuff. I want the pink for the lips to be very thin. It's because we're going to be layering this a lot, and we want the layers underneath to show through in the finish. And don't be fooled into thinking that you have to get the exact color with every spot. And remember, you can work lighter than need be. So softer and lighter are my suggestions. And flake white, lead-based white, really forces you to use more of it when you want to raise the value like that, which is a very, very useful thing, again, with portraiture. I clean off the brush. And if you've never used turpentine, like I said, Nelson I heard that he strictly used turpentine rather than OMS, odorless mineral spirits. It also has a different handling than, you know, just using something like Gamsol, which I use still. I mean, of course I use it. I have it here. So I have my Gamsol, I have my turpentine, so I have everything around me. That being said, that is the second 20-minute marker, so let me go ahead and just put this brush stroke down. Then I'll take a break. As you see, I'm utilizing the raw umber tone. And building very soft. Alright, let's take a break. Alright, we're now beginning the third 20-minute interval. So after taking a break, I came back and I had to decide whether or not to start to put in the values for the background, and I don't think I'll do that with this one, simply because I'm trying to draw. And so I'm drawing with these very simple shapes, and again, the mindset is color underpainting, so I'm working not as with not as thick paint and with not as chromatic paint. Paint mixture, should I say. That being said, it's very hard to not use bright color when you know, trying to replicate a Nelson Shanks. Now the tendency is to want to go in and you know, further describe things like the eyes and the nostrils and the eyelash and things like that, but again, it's not going to be as helpful for you in your first layer of color to over describe anything. You want to build it as a unit. Now, since Nelson was most certainly using a natural light, I think that it's important to try to get the subtlety of the shadow shape in place at this point. I'm going to throw in a little bit of the medium, just a little bit. I'm going to use a scrubber, a little scrubby scrub brush. Again, just because I don't want a sharp edge. So the light and shadow is not as sharp with natural light as it is with artificial light. So I'm being very cautious about that. Put in a little something here for the back of the hair. Let's just use raw umber. I'm very cautious of this distance, so I don't want it to be too far off. I will say underpainting like this with color is significantly more difficult than using a monochromatic underpainting. So with my students, I start them off almost always with monochromatic. Because when you start like this, it does complicate the judgment. So you really have to train yourself not to overthink the color and the color underpainting. Instead, focus on value. Value alone is one of the strongest ways of describing form, not color. That's why you can have things like a grisaille that looks realistic. But if there's no understanding of values, then it kind of becomes vaporous and not really describing volumes. Color is best, I think, to describe the condition of the light source, which we're kind of describing here with the warm shadow, indicating that there's potentially a cool north light window, or a cool light being emitted by a north light window. And remember, as I've been saying before, painting is a commitment. It's not something that you want to just, start just for the heck of it and not have a plan about how you're going to take that painting to completion. So that's why right now I'm just going for the edges, making sure that I leave the edges soft and make sure I'm in a good position to continue working this the next time. And I do believe that the usage of flake white is a big part of what gives Nelson's work a lot of depth. I can see it in the reproduction of the painting and the photographs. And when I was fortunate enough to see his paintings in person a long time ago. I'll paint in the shadow for the hair, the cast shadow, and then I think I'll paint over that shadow when it comes time to paint the hair. Just so when we actually paint the hair in, it'll feel like the hair is resting over top of the forehead. I see a little influence of blue in the eyebrow here, so I'll just use the raw umber into these flesh tones. Even the eyebrows have planes, so you can clearly see that in Nelson's painting, how there's a bottom plane here. The eyebrows aren't just an afterthought that are painted in there. I also see that I probably have too much distance here for the glabella, or that's the root of the nose. So I have a little too much distance, so I'm gonna adjust that. So I think that's a little bit closer to the original. And I'm going to leave the eyes alone. I may throw in a dark accent, but I think I'll just leave the eyes be. I'm putting in the tear ducts just so I have an indication of the distance between the eyes. I don't want that distance to be too off. I have the highlight a little too far. Let's push it back over here. And the highlight should describe the form, not just be a random dot. Now it's describing the form a little bit better. That being said, we have just passed the 20-minute mark. Remember, if you would like to take online classes with me, please go to patreon.com/upariartist. You can also just scroll down to the description box down below where I have links to the online class. Remember, it's just $10 a month. Go to Patreon, select the mentorship tier or the live stream tier. All of the materials that I'm using, including the palette and the colors, are listed in the description box down below if you would like to purchase the same type of materials that I'm using. Remember to feel free to leave a comment. It's nice when we have a nice dialogue going on in the comment section of this video. Remember, online students, that you can use this Nelson Shanks as another extracurricular activity alongside the lessons for the online class. That being said, if you would like to see more of these videos, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I wish you the best in all of your artwork, and I'll see you on the next one. And it's now time for our new patron shoutouts. And so thank you so much, Teresa Britton. And thank you so much, Layla Mahaloiji. Thank you so much, Muriel Varshay. I hope that I can pronounce your names properly. Again, thank you so much for your support on my Patreon. Your support means so much to me. Your support means the world to me. I really hope that you will enjoy the benefits on my Patreon, such as the online classes and the behind-the-scenes episodes, along with the live chats and the live stream painting demonstrations. I hope that you'll enjoy the online community we have on Patreon. Again, I wish you the best in all of your artwork, and I'll see you on the next one.